Hello everyone, we are back again with another edition of Mellow Musings. Mellow Musings, and this is the 20th episode. And once again, we have something very interesting for everyone, something that we've all been wondering about. You know, every time October comes around, we all wonder who's going to get the Nobel Prize this time. And suddenly, the people who are in control, they pull out a rabbit from the hat, which we have never seen before, which we have not heard of. But then he's our Nobel laureate, and we have to applaud it. So today, in Mellow Musings, we are going to talk about, or rather, we are going to hear about this new Nobel laureate, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. Have I got the name right?
Yeah, more or less. Good.
Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. Yeah,
Krasznahorkoi, right. Yeah.
Krasznahorkoi. And the speaker today is Krishnan Unni, Professor Krishnan Unni. He is one of us. He has been with us for a long time, and he is one of our favorites. You can see that there are some more favorites on the screen. Dharsab is here, Dr. Anil Prasad is here. And well, we depend on these guys so that we can carry on some fruitful discussion about the things that excite us. Right. By now, we all know about Mellow Musings. We all know about Mellow and the kind of work that we are doing. So without wasting much time, because we are really eager to get going, I am going to request Professor Krishnan Unni, and I hope by now all of you are familiar with Unni. He is a professor in Delhi University, and he has been a speaker at our platforms quite more than once, several times. Yeah, we are grateful for that, Unni. He is really indispensable, I think. Yeah. Okay, so we have requested him to talk about this Nobel laureate because, well, very few of us had even heard his name. And Unni, trust Unni, he had read some of his works and he knew about it. So I said, well, you're just the right person to talk to us about it. So Unni, we have 35 people in the audience today. And well, I can see that Bilge is here from Turkey. Bilge is here from Turkey. And let me see if I can spot anybody else from outside India. Rajeshwari, are you from the US, Rajeshwari? We have a Rajeshwari in the US who joins us sometimes. And well, these are the people that we have. And very soon, I think some more will also join us from abroad. And normally, you know, when Unni is the speaker and when we have a topic like this, you can expect a good turnout. So over to you, Unni. I am not going to attempt to give an introduction to the Nobel laureate because I have read just a little bit on the internet, but I would love to hear more about it. And people in the background, the young scholars in the background, they were all told to read up a little, you know, so that you know what we are going to be discussing today. So over to you, Unni. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you, Professor Manju, and it's a great delight to be a part of these Mellow Musings, which undoubtedly has been one of the intellectual, engaging, conceptual platforms in literary studies. And I had given another lecture last year, if I remember correctly, in the Mellow Musings. And I'm especially glad that I got this opportunity to say something on the Nobel laureate Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. October always comes with a lot of surprises, isn't it? October is a month of climate change. There are a lot of international platforms which people all over the world are eagerly looking at when October turns up. And one such platform undoubtedly is Nobel Prize for Literature. There are a lot of bets, which are there, which usually people do bet which a writer would probably win the Nobel Prize list, this year, or which a writer would win the Nobel Prize the next year. So we have seen all these things. And contrary to our expectations, most of the time the Nobel Prize will go to a different person rather than the person whom we were thinking about in our mind. So this is quite a normal phenomenon, and this has been happening for quite some time. I remember an instance that my father got an opportunity to interview Günter Grass way back in the 1970s, when Grass was such a great figure, literary figure, at that point of time from Germany. And the prospects of Grass winning the Nobel Prize was also, very likely. But it took approximately 20 years after that interview when Günter Grass won the Nobel Prize. And many people thought that Grass would never get the Nobel Prize also. This year also there was a lot of conjectures. One such conjecture was Salman Rushdie by all probability will win. Yet another conjecture was Amitav Ghosh is in the last list. Of course, the fact is no one knows who goes to the last list till the very last moment when the Nobel Prize is announced. And let me tell you, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi was not a person who was not in the race. It's not like that. He was in the race for quite some time, approximately for 1 decade, more than 1 decade. And there were a lot of people who were having their bets on Laszlo Krasznahorkoi also. So this was not, when the result came, when the Nobel Prize was announced, so it did not come as a kind of a peculiar kind of a surprise for me. But that doesn't mean I didn't have the surprises before. I had the surprise when Patrick Modiano won the Nobel Prize, because I never thought Patrick Modiano will win the Nobel Prize, honestly speaking. But Modiano got it. And last year also I was surprised when Han Kang got it. Han Kang is a good writer, there is no doubt of it. But my feeling is Han Kang got it at a very too early. The prize was given to her too early. Year before last, when Jon Fosse won the Nobel Prize, I didn't have any surprise. But again, I was expecting Krasznahorkoi, either Krasznahorkoi or Rushdie or Anne Carson to win the prize, or even Margaret Atwood, whose name was in the pipeline for quite a long time. Of course, there are a lot of names like that. So what I'm going to do today is, I'm not going to give a great theoretical presentation on the major works of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. On the contrary, I will try to introduce you to some of the concerns of this writer, this Hungarian writer Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, taking into consideration the genealogy of this writer, which is going back to the early modernism. For instance, the deep influence of Nietzsche, Friedrich Nietzsche, then Franz Kafka, then a whole range of writers, German writers, European writers, as well as other writers, and how Krasznahorkoi came in the furor all of a sudden, in the firmament, how he started appearing in the firmament, literary firmament, all of a sudden. It's so surprising that the first, the debut novel of Krasznahorkoi, which is Southern Tango, I am having all his novels so far, which are translated into English. Southern Tango, this brilliant novel, which was published in 1985. This came as a big event, not only in Hungary, but all over Europe, on account of the fact that this novel was published immediately after Hello? Can you hear me?
Only we lost you in between. Yeah. So this novel was published in 1985 and it created a ripple.
Yeah. There was a small ruckus. The novel was published in 1985, immediately after the collapse of communism in Hungary. That's a central point which I would like to highlight. Southern Tango was published after the fall of communism in Hungary. And the story is set in a very remote hamlet in Hungary. And so it's a big surprise to me, because the novel starts by talking about the last days of October. And it's a surprise to me, actually, because I am giving this lecture on one of the last days of October. October is passing, all right? So it's a great surprise. And why this novel took attention in Europe is on account of the fact that narratively, this novel created a new kind of pathway, because lengthy sentences without a full stop. Sometimes the sentences are quite lengthy. Okay, 3-4 pages, extending to 3-4 pages, 5 pages, 6 pages, something like that, with only the commas. At the same time, the dialogues are condensed within the sentences, as a result of which we have a difficulty to find out whether the novel is written just for the sake of in a dialogic manner, or whether it is written in the manner of a historical documentation, or whether the novel is written as kind of an archival work, all right, which talks about what happens in a small Hungarian hamlet, okay, after the fall of communism. So there are two important sections in the novel. I'm just introducing the novel very, very briefly. I'm not going to get into the details of the work, okay. The novel has two important sections. And he is not attempting to write a political allegory. That is an important thing which you have to remember. Because if you look at the European writing before 1985, that was a time when most of these important writers were there. Günter Grass was very much there. Grass was alive. That was the time when Grass was writing his major novel called The Crab Walk. The Crab Walk, which amazingly talks about the disappearance of memory and how memory also can be compulsorily makes a disappearance due to the sinking of a ship. All right, Crab Walk by Günter Grass. Thomas Bernhard's influence was there. W. Sebald was coming to the fore. Sebald did not become a writer by the 1980s, though he was writing few of his narratives. His name was not that popular in Europe. And as some of you would be knowing, Sebald, in fact, sent one of his narratives for the participation of a literary prize. And surprisingly, W.G. Sebald did not even get the fourth place in the literary competition. So Sebald was not well known at that point of time. But yet, W.G. Sebald was writing, interspersing his narratives with a lot of photographs. Sebaldian writing opened up a new terrain in the European literature after the 1980s. So this is the time when Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is appearing with the Satan Tanko, in which he breaks all kinds of political allegories ever written in Europe. Of course, one of his greatest influence for this kind of narrative, he claims that he took from Kafka two important things. Number one, how to fear. Kafkaesque narratives gives us the idea of the notion of the fear. But obviously, fear cannot be theorized immediately. So this Kafkaesque fear, the fear that you are under the compulsion of certain kind of unknown kind of forces, and you are trammeled by these forces each and every time. There will come a time that you will be thrown out of this place, whether it can be a small Hungarian hamlet, or whether it can be a wider plane where you try to express your political activism. All these things have disappeared completely. One must remember here that Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is not giving enough attention to the Soviet invasion of Hungary. And people started wondering why. Such a brilliant writer, he is not overtly or covertly talking about the Soviet invasion of Hungary. On the contrary, Krasznahorkoi is giving the idea that political allegories in the form of fiction need to be completely dismantled. So, after Kafka, Krasznahorkoi was influenced by Thomas Bernhard and definitely by W.G. Sebald. But regarding Sebald, if one goes through different kinds of interviews which are given by Krasznahorkoi, he is not giving any prominent reference to W.G. Sebald, and I wonder why. Just 2 weeks before, a friend of mine and also a student of mine happened to interview George Sistrits, one of the translators, the major translators of Krasznahorkoi. He is the person who translated Satan Tanko, this novel also, the Debua novel by Krasznahorkoi. And very fascinatingly, he tells certain things. Because the translator was given 10 years. Can you believe this? A translator is given the time 10 years to translate a novel by the publisher, which in any part of the globe is not a possibility. But Sistrits, he was given 10 years to translate Satan Tanko because it was such a hard labor for him. But ladies and gentlemen, very successfully he translated that. Not by taking 10 years, he took only 6 years. So Satan Tango appears. Immediately after that, Satan Tango was made into a film by the greatest cinematographer, director, Bela Tarr. And I'll be talking about Bela Tarr because Bela Tarr is one person who collaborated with Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, who made him famous. Satan Tango became a world famous movie, art movie. It can also be viewed as a mainstream film and also as a kind of a popular film due to different narratological diachronic kind of incidents that happen in Satan Tango. Now, another peculiar instance which I would like to talk about Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is Krasznahokoi's use of animals, the animal imagery which figures in his stories and also in some of his major novels. For example, he is more fascinated by certain kind of animals like, these are the animals like a wolf, jackals. On the contrary, if you are looking at Kafka, of course, in Kafka, you would say horses are there and birds are there. There are different kinds of birds which are coming up. Kafka wrote a very, very small story which is called The Vulture. Kafka is also fascinated by other kinds of creatures. For instance, of course, we know that beetles, all right, and the metamorphosis, the transformation is a story which all of us know. So I'm not going to get into the detail of that. In one of the interviews, Krasznahorkoi was asked, have you seen a jackal or have you seen a wolf direct, face to face? And Krasznahorkoi says no. But where did you see the wolf? He says that he had seen the wolf stuffed. So while he was taking a stroll, he saw the wolf stuffed, the body of the wolf stuffed in one of the meat markets or whatever. And then Krasznahorkoi says he also saw a wolf which was ran down under the wheels of a truck. So that these images gave Krasznahorkoi the image of, absolute horror. And horror is an important, plays a very crucial role in the context of the post-Holocaustian European writing, I would say, which is again elaborated by W.G. Sebald in his various narratives. For instance, the Emigrants, the Rings of Saturn, and of course, the most famous Austerlitz. I'm talking about Sebald's novel at this point of time. Now, The Melancholy of Resistance is yet another novel by Krasznahorkoi, which deals with the indescribable things. Because The Melancholy of Resistance is a peculiar work, which deals with, I would say, the indescribable things that happen in the Hungarian town. With the arrival of a circus, a beautiful circus is coming up. As you know, normally when the circus comes, a small town, almost all the European towns and even the Indian towns are not, excluded from this. There is going to be a great extravagance, joy, and there is going to be a great celebration. And young children will be after the circus players. They want to see the animals. They want to see all these kinds of things. But The Melancholy of Resistance, I would say, is one of the primary texts which was published in the last century, toward the end of the last century, that gave the notion that European melancholy can be theorized in a different way. And that is going to be my central focus in my lecture today. How do you theorize European melancholy? I would say Krasznahorkoi was very much a part of the late existentialist tradition of European writing, which begins from the late 1970s, when the actual existential tradition started kind of waning. But the human condition was at the center. For example, Peter Hanke, who again won the Nobel Prize. Peter Hanke is another writer who belongs to this kind of an existential tradition. But when we get into The Melancholy of Resistance, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi would like to tell us that melancholy is not within us. However, there are different platitudes of melancholy which give us the sensation that we are all under melancholy which never can be removed. So melancholy is not something internally produced. At the same time, melancholy is not something which the state produces also. Then what is melancholy? That's a big question. And this question has been addressed by, I would say, if you go through the later works by Peter Bernhardt, some of the works by W.G. Sebald, some of the works by Peter Hanke, and Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, but Krasznahorkoi gives us it a peculiar shape. Melancholy is our daily course of activity where nothing completely fulfills. We have the desire to fulfill many things. The moment when we realize that we fail to fulfill certain things, the melancholy seeps in very slowly, gradually. Such an approach of melancholy is more ethically founded. Ethically founded, particularly in the case of Hungary, and particularly in the case of two, three other peripheral European countries. Why I am saying this is because of the fact that a German writer or an Italian writer like a Lampedusa, or some of these postmodern Italian writers like, for instance, Italo Calvino, okay, or even Elena Ferrante, the contemporary writer Elena Ferrante from Italy, who is a famous contender for the Nobel Prize again. All these writers never touched upon this point because this gives us a sensation that Europe itself is not a unified continent. Inside Europe, there are acute differences. There are significant, remarkable differences between the notion of how to perceive melancholy. Some people believe that people from Sweden, writers from Sweden, writers from the Icelandic countries, they are the people who are having this melancholy. Perhaps yes, geographically speaking, yes. But as far as Krasznahorkoi is concerned, the arrival of this circus in this fascinating town, that produces the melancholy. And we have an interesting character in this novel, Melancholy of Resistance. I am talking about the Melancholy of Resistance. The name of the character is Valuska, Valusca, Valuska, whose head is in the clouds. Okay, this character is a kind of a magical character whose head is in the clouds. And a cloud itself is a symbolic representation of melancholy. That once you are clouded, because in the sense, obviously, this is a circus. And in the circus, we are having a character who is again ridiculed by the public, but the mother never leaves this character just because the mother knows that this character has to produce certain things. The characters are not connected to each other, but they have some sense of surreal charm. There is some kind of a surreal charm. So reading a novel like The Melancholy of Resistance made me remember a lot of the surreal paintings by Coan Miró, or even some of the very fascinating surreal paintings by Salvador Dali, and even by Andre Breton. Because these surreal images are constantly coming up because you are twice removed from the daily course of realities, or even the sociological context where the circus is rooted. And there is an interesting comment which George Citrus, the translator, tells us. The translator gives us the idea that the novel, while he was translating this novel, it was like a slow lava flow, the narrative. The narrative is like a volcano has erupted. After the volcano eruption, the lava is flowing, the slow lava. Just imagine the volcano eruption and the flowing of the slow lava. So the narrative is, it was just like that. Now, in the first part of the novel, there is a distance between the lives lived by the townsfolk and the inhuman sense of the sinister happenings which are connected to the melancholy. Now, yet another work, which is a very fascinating work, is a collection of stories, but all the stories together, it produces a peculiar kind of a novelistic narrative. It's a Sabo There Below. It's one of the most discussed work by, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. I have all these books here. I'll be showing you. And Sabo There Below, it is setting up the Christian apocalypse against the Buddhism and Taoism. Okay, and I would say Krasznahorkoi was one writer, who started, bringing these polarities of Buddhism, Taoism, set against a Christian apocalyptic idea, the notion of the apocalyptic idea. And the stories are, absolutely brimming with a relationship between the artist. There is an artist, and the art as a very powerful vehicle to throw away certain kind of husks in which we are completely enmeshed in. That is Sabo There Below. It's an entirely different text where I would say from the beginning of the 2000s, Krasznahorkoi started thinking about the Orient. There is always this kind of the displacement of space and time with respect to the European sense of time, which is a linear one, and the Oriental sense of time, which is a cyclical one. So the clash is very clear. But Laszlo is not privileging the European sense of time over the Oriental sense of time, nor he is privileging the Oriental sense of time over the European sense of time. But he would like to say the dangers of the world which further one can theorize. They can happen if there is a kind of a connection between uh, the East and the West. This is where one gets completely puzzled. This is a new turn in the European writing. Because if you look at any one of the contemporary European writers, other than Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, no one is peculiarly dealing with this kind of an issue. Whether the East and the West can be connected somehow theologically, metaphysically, ontologically, epistemologically. So the questions are very, very crucial. We come across the travel, the endless travel of the protagonists, and these travels never finish. Like the last novel which was translated by Krasznahorkoi just appeared in the market. And I haven't read it, but I know about the novel. It's called Air Stars, 70009, something like that. And that novel contains only one sentence, just one sentence. The sentence starts in page number 1, and the sentence ends in page number 449. Are you getting it? Just one sentence with a lot of commas, lot of ellipses or whatever. And how can a writer write a novel like this? Is a big question. That is something which is connected to narratology. It's not true that people haven't attempted that. There are a lot of people who have done a similar attempt. For instance, if you go through one of the greatest modern European writers like Peter Weiss. Peter Weiss is known as not as a novelist, but as a dramatist. But if you go through his novels like the Aesthetics of Resistance, the novel which is in 3 volumes, there is an attempt to break the linear narrative and to produce endless monologues. So we come across not a single paragraph with a paragraphical division or with a certain other kinds of things. So Saibo, there below, the stories bring with the studio of the Florentine Renaissance painter. There is a brilliant Florentine Renaissance painter there. Then there is a no actor, N-O-H, no actor. So it's an amalgamation of the art and the question of whether art survive, the question of the contemporary destruction, the modalities of the museum. So look at the platitudes of this writer. He is looking at a variety of things. One cannot theorize or one cannot, put Laszlo Krasznahorkoi in one in one compartment, saying he is just a postmodern writer, or he is writing the super allegories of Europe, or he is rehistoricizing the history of Hungary. None of these are applicable to this writer. I would like to go through a very fascinating text, which is again, the title of the book is very interesting. A mountain in the north, a lake to the south, paths to the west, a river to the east. Okay, this is the title of a book. A mountain to the north, a lake to the south, paths to the west, a river to the east. This is one of the very fascinating, very, very fascinating works which I have read. And honestly speaking, I have my reservations with this book. This is also a book where Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is getting into Buddhism. He talks about the Tao. He talks about the Taoist temples and the rest of the things. Again, the motif of the journey, which is endlessly deferred, is coming up here. There is a displacement of space and time. There are paradoxical oxymorons which are coming up in the language. Of course, it is written in a fashion that Geisha finds it a major problem to gel with the surroundings. So the journey is completely toward the east. So after 2010, we find there is a remarkable turning point in this writer, because this writer, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, is looking at the east. Which doesn't mean that he has completely forgotten the Europe, which he never can forget the Europe at all. But there is a definite turning point to the Orientalist questions, Orientalist positions of the subjective positions. And what he does in this book is, he is trying to bring geisha in the context of the Tibetan monarchy and also the Japanese Buddhism. He tries to give a different value to geisha. And through that, he is trying to motivate the traveler to travel beyond the Orient, which means the Orient is not the whole thing. And one would remind here the late 19th century discourses about the German discourses about the Orient. For instance, or starting from Max Muller, one can say Arthur Schopenhauer, one of the greatest German philosophers. He was deeply influenced by all these Oriental ideas. All right, he was too much into the philosophy of Shankara. There is no doubt of it. The World of Will and Representation in 2 volumes, and Paralga and Palomina. Okay, another famous book by Arthur Schopenhauer. And even at the beginning of the 20th century, though 20th century had seen the rise of Nazism, fascism, and everything, Gunter Grass himself was a Nazi for some time till he was 8 years old, and he repented very, very late. Of course, you know that Martin Heidegger was a Nazi. He was directly writing letters to Hitler, and Hitler was inviting Heidegger, to his dinner parties and the rest of the things. But Heidegger took a long time to repent, and there is a big debate regarding that, whether he really repented or not. But these questions, these people, despite their beliefs in peculiar kind of ideologies or whatever, it must be remembered that they were also influenced in some sense, not all of them, in some sense, by what is happening in the East. So there is, as far as the German writing is concerned, there is a general concern regarding the East. But as far as the Hungarian writing is concerned, please remember Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is the second Hungarian writer to win the Nobel Prize. And before him, it was Imre Kurz, who wrote about the consequences of the Holocaust. He himself was a victim of the Holocaust. Imre Kurz won the Nobel Prize many years ago. And it is after Imre Kurz, it is Krasznahorkoi who wins the prize. I would like to point out one instance. Krasznahorkoi collaborated with Bela Tarr to write a famous film script, The Turin Horse. The Turin Horse. So we know the Turin Horse is deeply influenced by the famous incident that how Nietzsche got his breakdown. One day when Nietzsche was in the balcony, he saw someone in the distance whipping a horse, constantly whipping the horse. The horse was bleeding, the horse was crying. Nietzsche went out of his balcony, he got down. He went to that place and flung his hands around the neck of the horse, and Nietzsche started crying. From the next week onwards, Nietzsche had a terrible breakdown, mental breakdown. But I don't completely subscribe to the to the breakdown theory of Nietzsche just by this incident. The recent biographers of Nietzsche, like Rudiger Safransky, they believe that Nietzsche used to have the breakdowns from time and again. Perhaps this incident might have accentuated Nietzsche's internal passions, love, compassion, and all. But ladies and gentlemen, remember, there is an instance in Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky, which all of you would remember, the dream of Raskolnikov. That was, Raskolnikov goes to the Haymarket with his father. And in the Haymarket, he finds a horseman called Mikolka. He is heavily drunk, and he tells his horse to get up. The horse is not even getting up. And he is whipping the horse again and again and again. It's a terrible incident. And that becomes a public spectacle. This is a dream which Raskolnikov sees in Dostoevsky's famous novel Crime and Punishment. By all probability, Friedrich Nietzsche would have read Crime and Punishment. Definitely, there are Dostoevskian influences in Nietzsche. Though we do not have a direct account from Nietzsche's letters that Nietzsche has read Dostoevsky. So Nietzsche's idea of flinging his hands around the horse which is bleeding, and showing that kind of a compassion, love, and affection, definitely has a genealogy. If one can trace that genealogy back to Crime and Punishment by Dostoevsky. This is the point which I would like to mention. And when Bela Tarr collaborated with Laszlo Krasznahorkoi to write this film script, of course, they had a very tough time. Bela Tarr is very, very simple. Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, on the other hand, is very, 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 very hard on some of the poems. And if you watch the movie, The Turin Horse, you will be completely taken aback by the amazing sense of portraying the grief of the man, how the old man is coming on a horse. And the face of the horse is very, very pathetic. It's a tragic sense of life. And the horse's face, which pierces through the hard winter, when the snowflakes are falling all over the ground. The horse is limping. And once the horse reaches the house, the man tells his wife to cook some potatoes. And the wife the wife of the man put some potatoes inside a hot boiled water, and later taking it up, and with the scringy and scroungy fingers, they try to peel the layers of the potato. It shows the tragic, the absolute tragic, the pathos. The tragic and the pathos are really portrayed through the lens of Nietzsche in this famous movie, The Touring Horse. Some of you, I know, that might have seen the movie The Touring Horse. And I would like to request you to watch this movie very, very carefully, not once, several times, because it's something remarkable as far as the latest European cinematography is concerned. Bellator is one of the finest directors in Europe right now. Now, the question of melancholy is the last point which I would like to address. In almost all the novels by Laszlo Karszakoi, this melancholy is pervading. There is a pervading sense of melancholy. For instance, this fascinating book, The World Goes On. The title of the book is The World Goes On. And yet another book, which I already mentioned, A Mountain to the North, A Lake to the South, Paths to the West, A River to the East. And the latest one, including the latest one, and War and War, another famous work by Laszlo Karszakoi. All these works have a pervading sense of melancholy. So how do you look at European melancholy right now? Is melancholy something a universal phenomenon? Or does melancholy have its own differences and different kinds of platitudes and latitudes when we look at the human condition? I think this is the point which the Nobel Committee also seriously discussed. Okay, there are different writers who have written about melancholy. It's not true that all writers of melancholy are the greatest writers. Of course, they have their own platforms, they have their own significant positions in their countries. But this melancholy is something different. This melancholy is something which is anticipatory melancholy regarding what is going to happen in an entire continent like Europe. So I would say Laszlo Karszakoi, in all these fictions, is trying to expose or trying to give a new idea regarding a new sense of melancholy pervading humanity, which is concerned with the climate change, which is concerned with the war and war. There are thousands of war sequences which are coming up. And most interestingly, most fascinatingly, human beings are not the only subjects of the melancholy in this planet. Please remember, birds, animals, ants, jackals, foxes, and also wolves, they are all part of this melancholy. So melancholy is something universally pervading. And what makes melancholy an implicating subject is there is a deep-seated anxiety in this melancholy. When we look at that, due to the recent climatic changes, due to the rise of these new kinds of exposing systems or something like that, we are doubly bracketing a lizard in our room. Or we have already bracketed thousands and thousands of fellow creatures which are there inside the room. As a result of which, the creatures who live along with us, they have also lost the sense of human touch and the human affection. That does not mean only the domestic animals. That means that is even applicable to an amoeba. There is a very interesting, sentence which Laszlo Karszakoi says in his famous book War and War. And in this novel, Laszlo Karszakoi says that war is there, but what is a rat for? There is a question like that. War is there. Where is a rat for? And it reminded me of one of the very famous texts which is written by W.G. Sebald. And in that, Sebald mentions a city which is completely ravaged by the bombs. Okay, the German city Dresden is completely bombed, and no one is there in the city. It's only rubbles. And people just stumble upon the rubbles to reach a post office. Post office is not seen, but the post box is seen. And Sebald writes, in such a context, the city is invaded by rats and cockroaches. Cockroaches and rats, they will never die. They are the ones which are always there in invading a city of ravages, completely a ravaged city. Now, the last point I would like to, culminate here, I would like to wind up here. How does one define the new tragic? This is the question which I have been thinking about. After reading 6 or 7, I have already gone through 7 major works by Laszlo Karszakoi. The latest one, I have got it. I haven't, the latest one in English, translated by sisters. I got it just, 2 days back, but I haven't started reading it. How does one define the new pathos? The new pathos and the new tragic. Now, here, it is not just one Europe which this writer is pointing at. This writer is pointing at Europe as many. So the uniform approach of looking at Europe, European literature, European narratives, from one peculiar point of, maybe we had seen enough things like Holocaust, post-Holocaust, other kinds of things. That is no more the concern with the Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. Krasznahorkoi is concerns, fundamental concern is the new tragic is something that is happening when we realize that the whole world is a kind of Cristo morto, okay? Because this is a collection of his story, Cristo morto. And this is a collection of the story because in this story, in this collection of the story, as Susan Sontag has pointed out, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi points out the ultimate destruction that can happen in Europe by bombing Hungary. Hungary will be completely torn down. And one of the famous poets, Miklos Radnoti, he has an amazing statement. A lot of people have died. Some people died in their sleep. Some people died when they were having a dinner. Some people died in their dreams. And when we walk through each and every part of Europe, we can find the corpses deeply buried under the earth, okay, under the rubble. They keep on speaking to us. They keep on whispering in our ears, which is again, yet another context, in the famous book Austerlitz novel by W.G. Sebald. One of the central characters is standing on a library, Bibliotheca Nationale, National, Library. And somehow or other, Austerlitz is having a feeling that, he is having a palpitating sensation. There is something which is tremendously shaking under his feet. Then he is afraid. He is asking someone else, why do I have a feeling that earth is shaking, under my feet? Then his friend is telling us, don't you know, this library is built upon a warehouse. And inside that warehouse, there were a lot of Jews who were murdered. Just imagine a library which is built up on the ravages of a warehouse, an old warehouse, where the Nazis really persecuted thousands and thousands of Jews. So the specters keep on coming up, constantly coming up. This is where Krasznahorkoi becomes important also, I believe, because we have the ultimate picture of destruction, not just a dystopia or apocalypse. Because I don't want to locate Krasznahorkoi as a great, apostle or a proponent of decay, destruction, and apocalypse. There are more readings on Krasznahorkoi. One can, if one goes through very, very closely the narratives of Krasznahorkoi, we find, there are thousands of other readings which are possible, which are concerned to the climatic change, the environment, the regional warfare, the breaking up of the nations, the breaking up of the continents, and again, a universal pervading melancholy, whose meaning is not just one, but the meanings are many. All right? So, ladies and gentlemen, Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, I would say, is not a very interesting read. One need to labor. I want you to labor with the works of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, right from Satan Tanko to that of the latest works which came in English, Ersatz. It's not an easy reading. But once you are into Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, it's like getting into a tangled jungle. It's a jungle where you come across different kinds of herbs, different kinds of huge trees. From the branches of the huge trees, certain kind of, strange kind of pythons and other kinds of things will be hanging down. At the same time, there will be small creatures which you never have seen in your life, slowly skirming on your skirts or on your trousers. You will be buffeted, constantly buffeted by heavy winds. Okay? And these heavy winds perhaps have got the capability to take you out of the jungle to somewhere else. You will never find a brook inside the jungle to have some water, to drink some water, you will never get, so you will be having a feeling sometimes that the jungle itself is looking like a desert. All right, but in fact it is not. The fascinating thing is it's not. But reading Krasznahorkoi is like a tangled jungle where you experience an entirely different question of the topographical, nationalistic, at the same time a high psychological, and I would say the great levels and the great heights of pathos, tragic, and undoubtedly melancholy. This is where I will conclude my lecture here, because I know that I haven't gone deep into any one of the texts by Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, but that was intentional. If I go deep into any text by Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, it will take a long time. I have read almost all his works which are in English, except one, and except two. The latest one I haven't read. I just got it. It's there with me, Sindalamara. All right. But of the 9 books which I have read by Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, this new tragic, this new sense of the pathos, this new sense of this melancholy are the themes which dog me like anything. I am having sleepless nights while I go through Krasznahorkoi. Let me tell you, because once you are in a tangled jungle, you may not be getting a hands of menace. You will be completely having lot of menacing, questions, lot of troubling questions, and these questions ultimately take you to a different kind of a level, where Krasznahorkoi seems to be one of the very powerful writers, who will be much discussed in recent times. And meanwhile, before I close, I would like to tell you, I got completely amazed. A dissertation from in Kerala University has already been published on Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. This is by Dr. Suja Matthew. And this was an MPhil dissertation. And the title was Towards a Dystopian Apocalypse, a cultural critic of Southern tango. Okay. And her PhD was also, she had a PhD also. Her PhD was also on Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. And the title of the PhD was Constructing Heterotopias, a spatial critique of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi's select fiction. I repeat, Constructing Heterotopias, a spatial critique of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi's select fiction. So which means, a group of writers have been working in India on Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. I would like to say that Krasznahorkoi is not just a writer who came to the firmament all of a sudden, when he won the Nobel Prize. Of course, I myself was expecting Krasznahorkoi to win that Nobel Prize in the last 1 decade. All right. But I was slightly skeptical because there were other writers, several other Nobel laureates, several other people who were likely to win the Nobel Prize, but it's a matter of chance. It's a purely a matter of chance. So I see the prospect of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, exploring Laszlo Krasznahorkoi by the academics, by the MELOW people, all my MELOW friends, and I wish that more and more study should come on the 3 aspects which I mentioned: pathos, the question of the new tragic, and ever-pervading melancholy, which is not just a European melancholy, but the ever-pervading melancholy. Can we do enough justice to Krasznahorkoi by keeping these things in the mind, and also keeping not in abeyance, the other 2 ideas, decay and a destruction. Decay and a destruction, the 2 important twin themes that figure in almost all the works of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. All right, I'll stop here. Thank you for your courtesy.
Okay, let's give him a hand. That's the least we can do online. And this was mind-blowing, and I'm quite blown away. Thank you, Unni. We can't thank you enough, actually.
My pleasure.
So you can see all the clapping going on. And those of you who are clapping, why don't you come onto the screen? You might have a question, you might have an observation. And incidentally, Professor Rainer has joined in, Motilal Rainer, he has joined in from the US. Thank you for joining, sir.
My pleasure. Yeah. I sent him the link yesterday, right?
Yeah. So he tried a couple of times and he got locked out, and then he came in again. And you can see we have young scholars and we have seasoned scholars also out here. So I would request more of you to switch on your videos. We've had this mind-blowing session. We have the Professor Talukdar out here, Sushmita Talukdar. Madam, are you in Nepal these days or in India? You're muted.
Yes, ma'am, I am in Nepal. For the
Okay,
last, yes, I came back last week.
right. So we have somebody from Nepal here. And Bilge, why don't you switch on your video? Bilge is from Turkey.
Yeah.
Okay, I will. Just a second.
Wonderful, wonderful.
Ma'am, may I just ask
Yes,
a
please.
question?
Yes, please. Hi, Bilge. Good to see you.
Hi.
Nice to see you too.
And it's still broad daylight in Turkey.
Little bit. The sun
Yes.
is down.
Roshan, over to you.
Yeah. Professor Unni, thank you very much. It's always a pleasure to listen to you, and let me confess that I haven't read this Nobel laureate, so it's difficult for me even to pronounce his name. But the broader question of melancholy that you brought in, as far as its, contextualization, like, I mean, the way you contextualized it, its local specificity, or say, for that matter, continent specificity. And gradually, of course, you hinted at it that fine, I mean, it's a concept, it's a notion that cannot be in any way, maybe, continent specific, a country specific or something. So I'd like you to dwell a little more on it, conceptually, theoretically, on the idea of melancholy, because melancholy that way, if I have to bring in Sanskrit aesthetics, it's a sthai bhav, like so many other bhavas that we have. And it tends to transcend borders that way. And I think if if our Hungarian friend, this Nobel laureate, if he has been able to feel the pulse of it, don't you think it's basically feeling the pulse of this melancholy which pervades, even though subliminally, across, like wherever we are, whichever situation we are in, but that, ever pervasive sense of melancholy is there. Professor Unni, did I make some sense?
Yeah, you are. Yeah.
Yeah, please, if you could respond to that, I'd appreciate that. I mean, how does it say, for that matter?
Right.
How does it tend to transcend,
Right.
this narrow geopolitical bounds, and eventually becomes, something that conveys, that actually, addresses a deeper concern of humanity at large, that deeper, the deepest rather, and the most serious, I'd say, concern of humanity at large. Conceptual though, but I think you could throw some light on it with reference to our Nobel laureate friend.
Yeah. Well, Roshan, it's a very complicated question, and I can only give some conjectures, honestly speaking. Complicated in the sense, of course, it's a wonderful question, but it's the way you pointed out, it made me think of different layers of melancholy. All right. See, as far as Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is concerned, his melancholy tradition, I would say, is springing from the early modern literatures. There is no doubt of it. But as I told you, that Laszlo Krasznahorkoi belongs to the final stage of the existentialist writers. For instance, people like Sartre. Many people think that Sartre was the greatest one of the greatest existentialist writer with whom existentialism got over. But that was not the whole thing. We find the same sense of melancholy in a different way figuring in the novels by Samuel Beckett, but that's a different one. But as far as Krasznahorkoi is concerned, there is this melancholy which is arising without any reason. That's a very fascinating one. There is no reason for melancholy, You can be comfortably happy in your country, but again you are melancholy. This melancholic nature is stemming up due to lot of I would say demographic, high psychological, psychoanalytic, and other kinds of reasons. And that has completely changes the narrative, the way the narrative is crafted. So he is not writing just like Beckett is doing. Beckettian writing, we find a lot of silence, and silence itself is a language. There is no doubt of it. But in Krasznahorkoi, there is no silence. Krasznahorkoi is narrative is completely speaking, but it speaks for whom, and it speaks from where? That is the question. So there is a deep-seated melancholy, as you pointed out. You are right, as far as the cultural and the cultural, national, regional, subnational changes are concerned. There is no doubt of it. But at the same time, even the characters, most of his characters are living in a very, they are not actually, the low-level characters. They are well-learned characters, but they carry this baggage of melancholy at the back of their mind. All right?
Yeah.
Because they move to one place to another. A travel from one place to another is also a melancholy travel. All right. So likewise, Krasznahorkoi would like to give us the idea that this is a pervading sense of melancholy, which is an anticipatory one, which is, to sometimes it can be connected to the different contexts of apocalypse or post-apocalypse or whatever. But I have a problem here. I do not want to claim that Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is a dystopian writer, because many people think that he's completely a dystopian writer. He is not a dystopian writer like that. His writings are having its own agenda, very, very clear agenda. All right. And he is elaborating this notion of melancholy without any reason, without any particular reason, as one of the literary forte.
Professor, let me come in a little, Professor Unni. When I go through the statement by the Nobel Prize Committee here,
yes.
So they've been able to identify, they've been able to recognize his compelling and visionary oeuvre that in the midst of apocalyptic terror reaffirms the power of art. Right now, the shift seems to be towards pure aesthetics, isn't it? Pure aesthetics. But what I admire today is that you have been able to, sort of embed our friend Laszlo. Laszlo is okay. दूसरे में थोड़ा time लगेगा. Let's embed. Let's kind of, it's like embedding him in a context which is a living, pulsating context, and of course it could be regionally specific, culturally specific, and of course, to some extent, addresses the concerns of almost all the cultures of the world. And that's the reason that I brought in this term called Sthai Bhava. And what the Nobel Committee has done is that you've got to be conscious of art for the sake of art as well. In the midst of apocalyptic terror, committee acknowledges, the times are such. However, the only recourse that you possibly could take amidst such terrible times is the art. So it's like the primacy of art, its superiority per se, and that kind of. So Nobel Committee that way has killed several birds through this stone, actually, Professor Unni. This is what I think. They've been able to diagnose, the actual problem of the times that we are in. In addition to that, what they say is that anyone who reaffirms that power of art, anyone, who comes up with that commitment, which at times we term as absolute commitment to writing or to art, is something which is extremely, extremely appreciable. So that's something, that's something. And my question, in fact, had a lot to do with the context, with the issues of the day, times that we are living in. In addition to that, I actually wanted to bring you to this aspect also, this aesthetic aspect, actually. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
yes, you are right. As far as Nobel Prize Committee is concerned, they were looking at, how Krasznahorkoi has been laboring to preserve the value of art in a different way. And where, obviously, even, they might have thought that even melancholy plays a very crucial role there. All
Yeah.
right. So, yeah, so you are right. You are right. I don't have any contrary view other than what you said.
All right. All right. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Roshan, and thank you, Unni. And Roshan, my compliments to you and congratulations. You have a new friend now, a Hungarian friend, and you are on first name basis with him. That's wonderful. That's wonderful, no? And Unni, Unni,
Yeah.
you have repeatedly in your talk mentioned that he writes in a very complex manner. That
Right.
one sentence comprises a whole book, or a whole book
Yes.
comprises one
Yes,
sentence.
yes. Yeah.
And that it's very difficult to get into his works and you get tangled and so on. And well, a lot of other things that you said. And my pet peeve is against the Nobel Committee, against the Swedish Academy. Why do they choose dystopias all the time? Why do they choose, something that is grotesque, absurd, dystopic? That is how his works have been described. So I guess you can't do anything about it. I can't do anything about it. Maybe the world is moving that way and we like to, I think there's an element of self-flagellation or something like that in the choice of a writer like this. But never mind, that's my personal opinion. And it doesn't really matter. But Professor Raina, ML Raina, you cannot just switch off your video and disappear. Would you like to say something? And Dr. Prasad, Professor Prasad is here, Anil Prasad. Would you like to say something? And of course, we have the Nobel laureate's next door neighbor, Bilge, who's out here. So perhaps she might want to add something.
I would like to add something. I
Yeah.
have not read much, but last week one literary magazine wanted me to write a short essay on Krasznahorkoi. I feel that he's not a dystopian writer because dystopian writers rely on a spectacle.
Exactly.
And Krasznahorkoi builds horror through the ordinary. And he exposes quiet terror of stagnation, the slow erosion of faith, and the absurdity of waiting for salvation, for revolution, for some final meaning that never arrives. And here I feel that he has shown that even in decay and ruin and despair, language can illuminate the human condition. And I find that here he has a kinship with Beckett.
Yeah, of course, of course.
The other observations are that he has taken despair to a level of transcendence, and literature reading is not an act of consumption, but of witnessing. Also, his new style showed that he is an architect of experience. And literature is not only a storytelling, but an existential discipline. Literature, finally, I would like to say that literature for him is not merely a commodity, but a deep intellectual engagement. That's what I wanted.
Absolutely. Absolutely, I agree. Just one sentence, just one sentence only. Yes, Krasznahorkoi has a absolute fine tie-up with Beckett. And after the Nobel Prize was announced, Adams, gave a call to Krasznahorkoi to get the first impression. And Krasznahorkoi says, I am reminded of Beckett because Beckett, when he won the Nobel Prize, his wife picked up the call, and she put down the receiver after the news, and she tells Beckett, a great catastrophe has fallen on you. You have won the Nobel Prize. And Beckett's response was, oh, what do I have to do with the literature? That was Beckett's response. What do I have to do with the literature? Then Beckett is booking a ticket to go to South Africa. He wanted to avoid the crew. So a similar response was the one which Krasznahorkoi was giving.
He mentions it in an interview.
Yes, absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, yeah.
Another thing I just like to ask you about, that in Satin Tango,
Yeah.
I have read somewhere that it is a kind of dance,
Yeah,
60
right.
steps forward and 60 steps backward.
Yeah.
So what is
Satin
the importance of this in the theme of Satin Tango?
Yes, it's not an allegorical portrayal of the war and also how the Hungarian Hamlet is getting destroyed, but it gives a very satirical picture of how the fall of the communist regime, satirically how the fall of the communist regimes can affect a country and what will happen to the common people. The common people will swing here and there, all right, like you pointed out. They are swinging here and there, and ultimately they just become the pawns in a political chessboard. That is the idea. It's a very fascinating thing. Very fascinatingly has constructed that. Right.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Prasad. Thank you, Unni, for that. And you see, when the Nobel Prize was announced, then in a lot of places they mentioned him as a dystopic writer. But now, what I read after that was that, he has, you can relate him to the absurd, to existentialism, and so on. There is one work in particular which I would love to read, and I believe it's a madcap short story called Spade Work for a Palace. Entering the madness of others. I don't know if it's available, but I would love to read it. And then there are also references to Dante. Dante is a character there, and then you have a Sancho Panza, and a lot of. So I would love to read the comic side of it, which would be another commentary, which would be a commentary on another aspect of the world. But
it's a fascinating compendium where all these characters and intertextual characters are popping up. There is Sancho Panza is coming up. Yeah. So it's a very fascinating compendium, this story. Right.
I will try and get this to read.
Ma'am, Bilge wants to say something.
Bilge, please.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Professor Unni, for making us think once more. Actually, I was really excited to hear that you were going to give this talk and it was announced when we were having the last musings in The Great Gatsby. And on a personal note, I tried very hard to find his books in Turkey, and he is translated in Turkish quite some time ago, but I had never gotten around it. And immediately as it was announced that he had received the Nobel Prize, all the books were gone. I just could not read it. I just could not have my hands on it. I tried. And unfortunately, like Manju has very nicely put it, I was out in the sea, but I still wanted to hear what you had said about him. And actually, Professor Sharma has asked partially my question, but I'm going to also ask you because I know you have also read another Nobel laureate, Pamuk.
Yes, of course.
And remember, he also talks about melancholy, and his melancholy is also tied to heterotopias, also tied to a place, which is very different from the European sense of space, place, whatever you want to say about it. Could you maybe, because you have read it, could you also comment on that a little bit?
Right. It's Bilge, in fact, I was expecting this question from you and you asked me. All right. Yeah. While I was going through some of the important works by Krasznahorkoi, the idea of melancholy from the Turkish point of view, Orhan Pamuk also sprang in my mind. And Pamuk's idea of melancholy is deeply connected to the imbricated memories of Istanbul, I would like to say. Because actually, the very interesting work by Pamuk is Istanbul. It's a life writing, it's an autobiographical work where he talks about how, in which context, Turkey is entirely different and is separated from the other countries and other parts, culturally, based on religion, based on certain other kind of questions, There is a political question also. So, as far as Pamuk is concerned, Pamuk's melancholy is very, very politically imbricated one. All right. Whereas, as far as Laszlo Krasznahorkoi is concerned, it's not simply a political idea of melancholy which is seeping in. On the contrary, it has got a universal appeal. Universal appeal in the sense, without melancholy, further movement is not possible. This is going to make us think about what exactly will be the future of Europe in the coming decades. All right. However, Pamuk is not making us think like that. Pamuk's idea of melancholy is having the fixed parameters as far as Turkey's past is concerned. The past of Turkey, the history of Turkey, the culture of Turkey, everything is concerned, which is even very clearly exposed in a novel like Snow. Pamuk's Snows. Even Snow is full of melancholy. It's not like you cannot deviate Snow from any question of melancholy which a Pamuk faces. All right. Here, but in the case of Laszlo Krasznahorkoi, it's not like that. Through the lens of Hungary and through the lens of Europe, Pamuk is giving a universal dimension to memory, a universal dimension to melancholy. All right, this is what I feel.
I have to add something to this.
Yes.
I think in Turkish there is a word Orhan Pamuk uses for melancholy. It is something like huzun. Huzun. And I think it's cultural melancholy.
Yeah.
And the melancholy of the place, Istanbul, something like that.
Exactly.
And what other things you say about the past and other things there are very
right.
That's just
Right.
I wanted to add. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Dr. Prasad. Thank you, Bilge and Krishnan. So we've had a very stimulating discussion, and I'm sure we would love to go on, but we need to read the books first, right? So if there are no more questions or observations, we can think of winding up now. Anybody else who would like to say something? Is there anything in the chat box? No, nothing in the chat box. Yeah. So, well, with that, we wind up this session today with a very, very warm thank you to Unni.
My pleasure.
Come again and talk to us about something else equally interesting. Whenever you have the time, we would love to have you on this platform again. Right? So we are going to meet again in 2 weeks, and until then, we can think about Laszlo Krasznahorkoi. Yes.
Yeah,
and
I'm okay
try
with
and
that.
get some of his books. Thank you, Unni, once again. Thank you, Roshan, Bilge,
Thank you, ma'am.
Dr.
Thank you,
Prasad, the young
everyone.
ladies who are on the screen, and also
Thanks,
the people
Bilge,
who are in the
Professor Prasad.
backdrop.
Thank you.
Thank you all.
Thank
Namaskar.
you. We are going to
Thank
meet
you.
again. Yes, Susmita, thank you for joining. We meet again in 2 weeks.
Bye.
Sure.
Bye-bye. Thanks,
Bye.
Unni.
Bye.
See you again.